I'm thankful for the foundation and especially General Oberoi to have invited me for this talk. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you physically since there were some pre-scheduled engagements which were very important and which I could not leave out. But again, it's good that through the march of technology, I'm here with you, and I'll be speaking to you on a few points that I had in mind. The larger picture of which was provided to me by General Oberoi. Just excuse me because I'm having a runny nose and a itchy throat, so just bear with me. I'd like to make my talk to you a little free-flowing, and I don't have a structure or slides, but I'm just going to touch upon a few points, and I would like us all to introspect rather than complain, or rather than ascribe a negative responsibility onto any particular person or any particular organization or any particular entity. When General Oberoi discussed this issue with me and this talk with me, he was of the opinion that we should probably have a protective parliamentary act concerning the war disabled. A statutory document in the form of a act passed by the Parliament which would protect the rights and the privileges of the disabled, of the war disabled. I think it's a very good idea, but I have a slightly different take on this, although agreeing with the concept at large. I would feel that rather than having a parliamentary act, we should have a substantive document, a substantive policy document which should deal with the war disabled and also other disabled if the need so arises. It's not a big deal in the sense that a policy document, a substantive policy document can be initiated by the government or by any organization along with stakeholder consultation. And why I am a little wary of a parliamentary act is the fact that firstly, the amendments and changes and alterations, progressive or otherwise, become very, very difficult in an act of parliament, and which requires an entire statutory system of bringing together various provisions, getting them passed, and you have to, ultimately engage with so many agencies, and it remains a very, very tough call. So rather than that, we should have a flexible policy document. And in the document, what should we have, people might ask? I would say only one thing: proper stakeholder consultation, and of course which goes along with empathy of the people involved. There are very negative aspects in this regard which affect the war disabled and also the other disabled. Both subjects are intertwined in a manner, so I would be touching upon the travails of other disabled also in between, because both issues are interrelated and very close to each other. What is lacking? What do we face? Firstly, there is a huge gap, and there is a lack of knowledge regarding disabilities, war disabilities, and other medical conditions. And I wouldn't say directly that empathy is lacking. However, even if there is empathy, there is total lack of knowledge about these issues. What is disability? What should be the changes brought in the regime of disability? How are war disabilities calculated? What post-operative care is required for war disabilities? What post-discharge care is required for war disabilities? Then the biggest thing that faces us, the biggest challenge that we are faced with, is the lack of a large heart. There is the absence of a large-hearted approach. I'll come to this later. By large-hearted approach, basically I mean that people who are the policy makers or who have to interpret policy do not have such a large heart, and they always view everything with suspicion. This is just not done, especially in cases of disabled personnel and war disabled personnel, and even other people who are suffering from or affected by any kind of medical condition. Then there is a lack of proper stakeholder consultation, as a result of which the decision making process and also the final decision remains faulty, and it is initiated and discussed by people who are not experts and who have no inkling at all about disabilities or what disabilities. So at the end of the day, you have decisions taken at the back of what disabled and at the back of other disabled persons, affecting those very what disabled and disabled persons, but in which there is no stake of such affected personnel and their voices are not heard. Hence, in fact, what disability is a far call. Even as I said, for regular medical conditions, there is lack of empathy because of lack of knowledge. And people within the organization are not at all aware of how such things function, what are the regulatory policies around it, what is the law around it, what have the courts ruled on disabilities or what disabilities, what are the practical difficulties faced by such people. I mean, to give a very small example, for example, when we're talking of normal medical conditions such as a heart disease or hypertension, you even hear very, very senior officers saying, oh, इसका फौज के साथ क्या लेना देना, फौज में हो गया तो क्या हो गया, वो तो फौज में तो बड़ी stress free life होती है. You hear statements like these, even by very senior officers. They say that, what does hearing loss or hypertension or a coronary artery disease, etc., have to do with military service? And now I'm just talking of regular medical conditions, not even of war disability. Why this lack of knowledge? Firstly, this also means that we are not educating our personnel, including at the senior ranks and the officer cadre, very well on these issues. You open up the rule book, and the rule book, the first appendix that deals with the disabilities which are affected by the stress and strain of military service, you'll find a list of disabilities such as ischemic heart disease, hypertension, psychosis, neurosis, etc., etc. So the opening rule itself says, not only for the military but also for the Central Armed Police Forces, that such disabilities, such medical conditions are affected by the stress and strain of military service. Interestingly, the rules even say, to take an example, that suicide, in case it occurs in a high altitude area, is also attributable to military service. But you'll find our people are blissfully unaware of these issues, and they make very strong and negative and sweeping statements about these issues, not realizing that it is sensitivity that we require to deal with any person who's dealing with a medical condition. This also leads to unnecessary litigation. And why litigation, when all these issues are covered by the rules and by how these rules have been interpreted by judicial decisions? I'm sorry. So as I said, war disabilities or disabilities in the line of duty, where one loses a limb, etc., are a far call, and even basic knowledge about regular medical conditions is lacking. What to talk of things such as concepts such as PTSD, when there is suspicion and lack of a large-hearted approach even for regular medical conditions. I think we have a tough task ahead, and that is where all of us come into play. That we have to be very open-minded about these things. We have to be very sensitive. We have to read up. We have to brace up. We have to upgrade our knowledge. We have to talk to people. We have to talk to affected people. We have to talk to the stakeholders, and then only we'll be able to do something about our disabled personnel and war disabled personnel. There is a basic care which should come as a logical after effect of any such eventuality. I'm reminded of my friend Major Navdeep Singh, who lost his leg during Operation Vijay, and he was left for dead initially, and then he was revived, and of course he's a famous sports person, and he's the pride of India. But one day when I was discussing with him, and he has so many shrapnels in his body, and now he's suffering from Parkinson's also. But when I was talking to him, I came to realize that when he lost his leg, there was nobody to counsel him that you have lost a part of your body. No clinical psychologist, no counselor, no doctor came to him to soften the blow in a way, to comfort him, to tell him that, okay, Major DP Singh, you have lost your leg, but don't worry, we'll take care of this, and there'll be post-operative care, and we are there to look after you. And losing a limb is not it's a great moment in a person's life. And if there is no one even to talk to you about these things, now these are very, very basic things which we are lacking. Why, I ask? Why, I ask? And it's not a very good approach followed by the military community of blaming the bureaucracy or blaming the political executive for every such problem. We have to look within. We have to introspect. No outer agency is going to come to save us. It is the military itself which has to work towards these issues. In policy formulation, for example, I remember, in the government letter which applies to war disabilities, there is a category E. It is the same on the civil side also in the Central Armed Police Forces. Both categories were approved by the Union Cabinet after the 5th Pay Commission, and the amount of pension and the method of calculation of pension, the war injury pension or disability pension, etc., is carried out based on this category. Now, within the military setup and then the defense ministry, there was a noting sheet floated that a particular manner in which these disabilities are being calculated is leading to undue advantage to war disabled personnel. Wherever the disabilities are of two kinds, one is a non-war disability and one is a war disability, which means that if a person has a regular disability and also battle casualty, then the way the disabilities are calculated, they floated a noting sheet how to change that system, how to reduce the entitlement, and they issued a letter. Now imagine this, the same category E applies to CAPFs also, and there has been no change in that because it was approved by Union Cabinet. The same parallel analogous letter which applies to the military, also approved by Union Cabinet, has been amended by our own people by using such derogatory terms, undue advantage, etc. Now where is it coming from? That's why I say a large heart. Why is anybody bothered about what a person is getting? If these are financial dues approved by the government, approved by the Union Cabinet, then who are we to question them? How can we pass a moral judgment on them? How can we say that, oh, there's an undue advantage? I remember even in courts, if you file a petition for a war disabled person or for liberalized family pension for a war widow, the kind of replies that are filed by the record officers or even by the AG's branch, they're derogatory to say the least. Again, words like undue advantage, or saying that, oh, if a person is allowed to seek premature retirement and we are still supposed to give him war injury pension or disability pension, including the service element, they'll start taking advantage and people will start retiring. Stuff like this. I mean, why are we bothered about these things? When there are rules as interpreted by the courts of law, it has to flow in terms of those rules. And these conditions have already been approved by the government, approved by judicial dicta. So we are not there to pass moral judgments or say that who will take advantage and who will not take advantage. That is not our job. Let's stick to our jobs, and that job is one, empathy. So when General Oberoi asked me what should be done about all these issues, I said what should be done is not looking towards the government all the time, or not looking towards external agencies, looking inside, looking inwards towards the military community and the policy makers within the military and the policy influencers within the military, that have a large heart, empathize with people who are disabled, don't use a negative approach while dealing with these issues. A few days back, somebody told me that for classification of battle casualties, now the AG's branch has suddenly started asking for something which is called as a severity certificate. Now this certificate was basically only for battle casualties who were war wounded, and now they've started transposing that same certificate on others, which basically says that he or she is suffering from this injury which is permanent. It has caused a considerable damage, and it is a permanent damage. Now this certificate was never required for regular battle casualties, but was only required for war wounded battle casualties, what we call BC brackets WW. Now look at the nuksan, the damage that this has caused. Now all battle casualties which are due to climatic conditions, for example, somebody suffers a medical condition climatic climatic conditions in Siachen Glacier. Now, how will he or she get a severity certificate? It's not even applicable. The government of India says that even if your disability is less than 20%, you're entitled to war injury pension. Now, a severity certificate would not be issued to such a person, as a result of which the government of India's policy will fail. Why? Only because nobody applied mind and they started transposing one concept of BCWW onto the regular concept of BC, which have no interplay whatsoever. So, no non-application of mind, and why it is happening? Because there are no experts who are being consulted. So, to conclude, I would say that what is required is just one, a substantive policy document where there would be only one call, that consult affected parties, consult experts, consult stakeholders, and come to a definite conclusion about policies which affect the war disabled. Develop, apart from this, as I said, develop empathy, have a large heart, don't pass moral judgments on these issues, be concerned only with your work, with a positive frame of mind. Do not go too much into the financial aspects which are determined by the government. It's not our job. It's not the job of the military to do so. From empathy, I'm also reminded that I've seen so many people writing letters to the AG's branch, to the records offices, and there is no reply whatsoever. But you write a letter to the BSF directorate or the CRPF directorate, immediately you get a reply. But over here, there has to be an audit. Let senior officers carry out an audit in the AG's branch and in all record offices about the number of letters received from war disabled or other personnel or any pensioner or widow, the number of letters received and the number of letters replied. The truth will be in front of you. Hence, to conclude again, have a large heart, empathize, consult stakeholders, consult experts. Jai Hind.